everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, the calendar says November, which means we are deep in the heart of rewatch season. It is not just Buckeyes. Michigan has the week off this week. So we are doing what every college football coach says you should not do. Tony, we are looking ahead. Dangerous. Will that hurt our performance on podcasts against Rutgers and UCLA? It's impossible to say, but you can't say it's not going to.
Well, I know I haven't watched UCLA, so it has already probably hurt mine. I will go ahead and admit it, but no, we are here to discuss our rewatch or initial watch mainly of Indiana's 27-24 win over Penn State. Are we looking ahead or are we just, looking around? I'd say looking around at the state of college football. And, we've seen a lot of people talking about how Indiana should be number one based on the entire season of work. All of the times they're blowing everybody out. They're just blowing everybody out except for, of course, Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State, which is, of their Big Ten games at this point. But whatever, whatever. So, let's just go ahead and share our thoughts on what we see. Tom, I'll let you go first. I know you've got some thoughts. You've been itching. You've been wanting to do this. What's your big problem?
Well, I guess let's start with, it's so lazy and trite to start with the quarterback. But, Tony, let's start with the quarterback because, Fernando Mendoza has obviously been a big topic of conversation in college football this year. I just saw an article from ESPN about how, oh, boy, Julian Sayin really needs to craft a narrative in the Michigan game and, to even have a chance to beat Fernando Mendoza for the Heisman. Is like, does he just need to win the rest of his games before the Heisman? Because it feels like that would probably handle it. But either way, Fernando Mendoza had a storybook finish in this game against Penn State. Was that directly caused by the fact that they had 3 empty possessions right before that storybook finish in crunch time on the road? Yes, it sure was. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the storybook finish. And, I think one thing that I was interested in, Mendoza, you've seen him enough in the highlights, and I watched that Indiana-Illinois game, which, boy, oh boy, was that a different game than this one. But, you watch him and it's like, oh boy, he can sling it around and he's got some good wide receivers and all that kind of stuff. And he was without Elijah Surratt in this game, which I think is one thing we need to sort of stipulate up front, that they were without probably their best wide receiver in this game. So that impacted this a little bit. But I was impressed with how well Fernando Mendoza ran the ball. There were a bunch of times when there's, it was 3rd and 5, they line up 5 wide and they just run a quarterback draw, boom, picks it up. Then he had an 18-yard touchdown just on a scramble. He had a scramble that turned to 2nd and 11 where it's like, oh boy, he's going to have to throw it away. It's going to be 3rd and 11. And it turned it into a 3rd and 4. And it's like, it's 7 yards, didn't pick up a first down, but it's a really important play where it really changes the likelihood of converting that series of downs. There was a 3rd and 10 where there were rushers coming off the edge. He rolled left, bought time, and made a nice throw for a first down. He just does a lot of stuff with his legs that you hear all about his throwing and you hear all about the offense on the whole, and oh boy, aren't they great? And they are. But I think that his running ability, he's not Michael Vick, but he can make stuff happen with his legs that really will extend drives and sometimes cap drives for them.
Yeah, for sure. He was sacked 3 times, rushed for 20 yards with those sacks in there, and had the 18-yard touchdown. Did a great job of scrambling to either pick up yards, or the other thing, when he scrambles, he keeps his eyes up, and he keeps them downfield, and he's a danger until the whistle is blown. And he has the confidence to make any throw, or to attempt any throw, and is also tough enough to know that I need this last yard, and I'm going to get hit for it, but it's okay because we need it. So he's got everything that you want. But yeah, he did throw an interception late, and that led to Penn State taking the 24-20 lead. And when I say late, it was like in the last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of the game, when Indiana is basically like, you just don't screw this up and we're going to be okay. And then he throws an interception and allows Penn State to convert with a quick change touchdown drive. And then you're like, well, okay, well, let's see what he does now. And then they ended up punting again. But then that final drive, like, one of my pet peeves is when teams try to they feel like they have to run the ball at least once in the 2-minute drill, and Indiana never ran the ball. So it's like, good job on you guys for just letting your quarterback rip it. And he was ripping it downfield against whatever Penn State was doing. And I think in my notes I have here, like they would show 6, 7, 8 guys, but never really brought anybody, never sent more than 4 on that final drive, even though it looked like a lot more. So they were trying to confuse him, but even on the last play, they got to him, but he got the ball up, and Omar Cooper obviously came down with it, and history was made, and the Heisman moment was had, and all of those good things. But when I watch this, one of the things that just keeps going over my mind is Penn State was getting to him, and they were getting after him, and the offensive line, the Indiana offensive line, was allowing him to be gotten to. He's great at escaping, but it's something to keep in mind at how much Penn State was affecting him.
Yeah, for sure. The offensive line, and they were banged up. They had Drew Evans, who was the starting left guard. He was out at the start of the game. So Zen Michalski, it's a name that will be familiar to Ohio State fans. He started at left guard. Then they rotated someone else in at left guard, and then Khalil Benson, who is the starting right tackle, he kind of got rolled up on. And then so Michalski then went in at right tackle for him. So they are banged up. And the offensive line is full of names that you might know. Carter Smith, who is a Central Ohio native, he's their starting left tackle. And Michalski, as I said, former Ohio State offensive lineman who transferred to Indiana before this season. He's in the mix there. Pat Coogan, who was on that Notre Dame team that Ohio State faced in the national championship last year, he's their starting center. So a lot of familiar names, but the offensive line was inconsistent. And it was absolutely not an offensive line where you went, boy, this is going to be a real strength of the team. It's not necessarily the thing that's going to get them beat at some point. It was okay, but it's definitely not a strength of the team. So that's certainly, and again, they had a couple guys banged up. So that's going to, if you're shuffling guys around in your line, you're going to have some inconsistency and some issues probably. But I think that is definitely something that would be, sort of one of these watch this spaces kind of thing where that might be something where they end up having issues against Penn State has not been great in pass rushing and in getting to the quarterback. And they were pretty good in terms of getting the quarterback, not always getting him down, but getting to the quarterback. So I think that's something that's interesting. One other thing, Tony, on offense, actually there's several more things on offense, but the next thing I wanted to touch on offense was we give Curt Cignetti all of this credit for talent evaluation and really finding these guys. And boy, he's turned all these guys who were James Madison into these national championship caliber teams. And man, oh man, what a talent evaluator. This moron had Charlie Becker on the bench most of the season. What an idiot. What are you, new? Dummy? Charlie Becker had 7 catches coming into this game. He's a 6'4" redshirt freshman wide receiver, just like some 3-star guy out of Nashville. And he comes in, holy pants, he looked like white Jeremiah Smith. That is one of the biggest, where have you been hiding this guy games I've ever seen. 6'4", he had a 53-yard reception right down the seam to start the third quarter. Then that pass earlier when I talked about Mendoza getting flushed out and having to kind of make a weird angle throw, made this catch behind him for a first down. Had a really nice catch on the sideline right near the goal line right before halftime that set up a score. He went way up to make a catch on third down late in the third quarter, and then had a first down catch after took a huge hit with 6 minutes left in the game. And then on that last drive, it's legitimately, it's one of those catches that you see Jeremiah Smith make. Mm-hmm. No one else can make this catch. And it was there's this guy that Indiana's not playing. He can also make this catch where he goes up, good coverage, goes up, makes the catch, brings his foot, brings his foot down in bounds. If Omar Cooper didn't make that 2020 Nebraska game, Jackson Smith and Jigba catch to win the game at the end, everyone's talking about the Charlie Becker catch that set that up. Because he is unbelievable. And it feels like, man, they may have accidentally found something that they just weren't using for some reason. I suspect this will not be the last we hear from Charlie Becker.
It was interesting that he was just throw it up, he'll grab it. Just, Charlie Becker down there somewhere. And he was, and maybe this is part of the elite programs trying to hoard players. This is when Jim Tressel didn't want to play Santonio Holmes in 2002. It's like, no, we're going to redshirt him. And then, the offense is struggling. And it's like, well, maybe we should. No, we can't. If there was 4 games that they could have played him, they would have found those 4 games. And, Becker looks like he belongs. And we talk about this with Ohio State, the competitive excellence to be able to step up when your number is called. And his number has not been called much. You mentioned it, 7 receptions coming into this game, and then having 7 in this, and stepping up when they desperately need him. Elijah Surratt is one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. I think he may still lead the Big Ten with 10 touchdown catches. He makes catches like Charlie Becker. And we saw Becker doing that this week, doubled all of his numbers, and now gives them maybe a 4th receiver that they can rely on with, Omar Cooper, Elijah Surratt, E.J. Williams. We saw a little bit in this one. I was a little surprised. Omar Cooper makes an incredible catch, and a great catch, and then to see how close it is to being incomplete based on his feet and his left foot just hovering over the ground and his right toes coming down, very, very similar to the Jackson Smith-Njigba. You can put that in the top 3 with those 2 and like Michael Thomas's catch from Evan Spencer against Alabama, where you've got eyeballs in your feet, don't you? This is the only way you could have made this play. And still, Omar Cooper, 6 catches for 32 yards in this game. So essentially held in check, except for that one play. And sure, it's a big one play, but you see like there's a path towards containing Omar Cooper. But again, probably more attention on him without Elijah Surratt.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think Indiana's offense has some scaling issues, and that's a term you'll hear people use sometimes, where it's just basically, if you're playing a terrible team, man, oh man, can you light it up? And every offense has this to a certain degree, where if you're playing a mid-level or worse defense, Ohio State could score 60 points on anyone they want to if that was their primary goal, was just to score as many points as they can. Indiana's kind of the same way, and Kurt Cignetti will keep that gas pedal down a little more than other folks will, just because he has a little bit more of a point to prove to sort of get everyone's attention. So they will put up a ton of points, and they put up 63 points against Illinois, and that was a game where Illinois had a bunch of injuries in their secondary. So, that had an impact on that as well. But you're seeing Indiana against some of the better competition, against Iowa, against Oregon, now against Penn State. All of a sudden they're scoring in the 20s. I don't think they've gotten to 30 against any of those teams, and they barely got out of got above 20 against a couple of them. So I think this is an Indiana team that is talented. It's an Indiana team that can play with the best teams in the country. But this is, you look at all the stats that Indiana has, and they are right at the top, and a bunch of stuff. First quarter scoring, they were plus 163 in the second half entering this game, which is the best in college football. They have all these real shiny offensive stats, but I think that there's bits and pieces of that where, Indiana can score whatever they're at, 40 points a game or whatever it is. They're not scoring 40 points a game in the college football playoff, and they're talented and they can put up points, and we should probably talk about the running game too, but they can put up points. But it's not quite, Indiana I don't think is going to win a 42-41 college football playoff game. They're going to probably have to win games more in the 20s.
Well, in that running game, Broman Hemby comes over from Maryland and maybe Toledo, I think, 12 for 55 with a long of 11. Kaelon Black, who came over from James Madison, 12 for 32 with a long of 10. Black does lead the Big Ten in number of rushes of at least 20 yards this season. That did not happen this week. Those 2 guys run hard. They always have. But I think Penn State held them pretty well in check overall, 31 for 108, 2 touchdowns, 3.5 yard per carry average, which is the same that Penn State managed on their side of the ball, 3.5 yards per carry. So I wasn't blown away by the running game. And sure, go ahead and continue to mention the fact that Elijah Surratt was not there, but Charlie Becker stepped up when he needed. And so there's, they filled that void pretty well. So I look at that running game and I can credit Penn State for doing a very good job there. And we already mentioned them getting after Mendoza. So I see what Penn State was able to do. And I see a way that Ohio State could do something similar. And Penn State had 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, an interception, 6 quarterback hurries, which is a stat that sometimes people list and sometimes people don't. There was a forced fumble on a blitz of Fernando Mendoza. The corner blitzes were effective. And so you're just watching this, and all of it, it's like you're not being blown away by anything that Indiana does offensively, but you know they have the talent and the wherewithal and the confidence to do whatever, whenever, but sometimes it's just not that way. And you mentioned the Iowa game, this game, the Oregon game. That's I think that in those games they're averaging about maybe 27 points per game, 26, 27 points per game, with a point differential of about 8 or 10 10 points from the Oregon themselves. But it's one score basically over those 3, which would be their 3 toughest games. And so you look at that and you're like, well, I feel like there's nothing here that should be able to that is more than Ohio State can handle. And right now, some of the online the early advanced lines have Ohio State like -5.5 over Indiana.
Yeah, that sounds probably about right. I think some of the like SP Plus, I think had Ohio State by 4-ish, something like that. And on a neutral site in Indiana, you're going to have pretty 50-50 crowd. So something in that range. Indiana, I think we have to have 2 separate conversations about Indiana. One is, I don't think they're good enough to run any of these teams off the field. They're certainly not running Ohio State off the field. They're not running even Penn State off the field. They're also, one thing that they have in common, in addition to those low-scoring games and their close games, they sure did win all 3 of them, didn't they? And that's something that for Indiana going into that game, if you want to build the case for Indiana beats Ohio State on a neutral field, I think that case starts with Indiana is battle-tested and has really had to, go through this. And Julian Sayin hasn't really had, Ryan Day is like trying to artificially create these situations where it's like, all right, Julian, pressure situation, no timeouts, 57 seconds left. You're on the road at Purdue. You got to get down there and kick a field goal. All right, champ, go get him. And Indiana has not had to have, Indiana has had to go win on the road. And Indiana has had a couple now where against Oregon had a turnover. Was it a pick 6, I think, late in that game in the fourth quarter where Oregon took the lead, and you're like, well, there you go. The storybook season, well, it was a good run, and then they come back and win the game. And this game was much the same, where Indiana was up but early in the second half, 20-7, something like that, 17-7, something like that. And, Penn State had turned the ball over a couple times, and it was like, boy, you could really see this spiraling for Penn State, and Indiana's about to win this game 34-10. And then Penn State comes back and they get the turnover, but they also force a couple stops. They score, they take the lead. The place is rocking. It's like, look at this. This is in the equivalent of the 2011 Ohio State Wisconsin game, where it's like this dead season, but look at this incredible, inspiring win. They really pulled together, and Indiana kind of goes, yeah, right, and then went down the field and made these incredible plays to win the game. So, I do think while we're having the Indiana's not good enough to blow these teams off the field conversation, I think we need to really be clear on this. Indiana is also good enough to come back and not get rattled in these close and late situations in ways that Ohio State hasn't been tested yet.
No, 100%. Completely agree. There's so much value in that. And even in this game, it's like, well, we already did it before. We know we can do it. We did it against Oregon. And after that pick 6 against Oregon, Curt Cignetti turned to Fernando Mendoza and basically said, "You having fun?" And then it's like, all right, let's go. And
that's a very specific kind of fun.
Yeah. And so like they've got this confidence and this attitude where it may have started off as false bravado last year. It is 100% bravado now. Like there's, you take it to a lie detector and there's going to be like, it's not necessarily a straight line, but no lies detected here. And you applaud them all for that, because not only, they're confident, they play confidently, they believe that, they believe in themselves and that they're going to get it done. And so far they have. And, if they do play, if Ohio State and Indiana do play, and it's game day or big noon kickoff, whatever, as they do their pick'ems, and you see the two logos all along, and it's like I see. I don't see everybody picking Ohio State in this one. So let's be clear that there's going to be some people that think that Indiana has a legitimate shot here, and they do, and that's because they do, and they will just swing. When Ryan Day is playing in some of these, like the Georgia game, where he's just like, we got to swing away, we just got to keep swinging, we got to keep swinging. That's Indiana against everybody. It's like Indiana against Western Kentucky. We just got to keep swinging. It's like, well, I don't know if you need to keep swinging against the Citadel or Indiana State. And no, we're going to keep swinging. And so they'll do that against whoever they run up against. Tom, can we talk about the defense, the Indiana defense? Defensive end Stephen Daly had a handful of tackles, like 2.5 tackles for loss, just flashing in, and not. He's listed at 6'1", 273 to give you an idea of like he's the kind of guy that excels in college at a place like Indiana. It's like, well, he doesn't have the NFL measurables. It's like, well, tell that to the left tackle and the right tackle and the left guard who can't handle him because he just flew by them, and he's in the backfield. He's backside tackle for loss, and he was one of the guys that, as we do these, you're like waiting for numbers to step out, to stand out, and he was one of the number 8 on the defensive line for the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, he transferred from Kent State, which, boy, you want to talk about having two very different football seasons the last 2 years. Kent State last year, which did not win a game, and Indiana this year, which has not yet lost a game. My favorite Stephen Daly play there was one where it was like a toss play to Nick Singleton just off the left side, and Daly beat the left tackle and got upfield so fast that I thought, is he going to intercept this toss? It was just a regular like toss from Ethan Grunkemeyer to Nick Singleton, and he got upfield so fast that I thought for a second he was going to intercept the pitch. He did not, but then he met Nick Singleton about an eighth of a second later and drove him directly backwards from the line of scrimmage. So yeah, he's definitely someone to know. I think another name to know is Aiden Fisher, the linebacker, number 4. I don't know if the Lombardi Award, I didn't see anywhere where the Lombardi Award swore me to secrecy. So I will tell you, I had a Lombardi Award vote this year, and he was one of the people that I got to vote for 4 finalists. And he was one of the 4 names that I put in there because very, very impressive player and, very smart player. He's, I compared Becker to Jeremiah Smith earlier, and, it's not exactly a comp, but it's also, he's kind of the Caleb Downs or the Sonny Styles type for Indiana, where, yeah, he's not going in the top 10 of the NFL draft, but he's also, man, oh man, he is smart player in the right place all the time, very quick reactions, just around the ball, sure tackler, just, he's number 4. He's another one to know in terms of that front 7. Tony, did you come away with some questions about the back 7? Because I feel like the 2 corner positions, I looked at the 2 corners and thought, well, they've got one.
Yeah, D'Angelo Pons is the one, and really nobody else stood out. And looking through my notes, and as you mentioned that, I'm like, I don't know if I wrote down anybody in the secondary other than Pons. And he was a name that we already know. He played well last year, but like, I don't have any other names here in terms of defensive backs that you just write guys that show up, and you look and Ethan Grunkemeyer, who Ohio State saw the week prior. In this game, he was 22 of 31, 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. A better rating than Fernando Mendoza. The outcome did not go his way. And yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think as long as you're protecting Julian Sayin, I don't see a lot here. I don't see enough here defensively for Indiana. And yeah, like secondarily, nobody really jumped out at me and was making plays. And maybe that's because Grunkemeyer wasn't close enough at times, but we saw a guy that hasn't done much of anything all season long, and Trevor Pena go for 6 for 99 with a long of 43 and 41 yards run after the catch as well. And probably would have been even worse overall if Penn State's receivers would have caught more passes than they did, because they had some drops in there as well.
Yeah, and D'Angelo Ponce definitely number 5 on your scorecard. He is definitely the guy who is the corner who is going to be on whoever the opposing team's best receiver is. He's going to be on them about as often as he can be. He's one of those guys who followed Signetti from James Madison. He's been there for a couple of years. There was a deep shot on the first play right after halftime, like right down the seam, and he had great coverage on that throw. But he's 5'9", so he's a great cornerback. We have seen 5'9" cornerbacks. Like the first time Ohio State played Oregon last year, we looked at I think it was Jabbar Muhammad, I think was the cornerback for Oregon, who we were talking about being like, was listed as 5'9" or 5'10", and you know what that means. And they didn't get after him the first time they played him. They didn't have success against him that much. The second time, they had a lot of success against him. So, a 5'9" corner against Ohio State's wide receivers is just kind of a, I don't know that that's a win. Maybe that's a neutral for Indiana. I don't think it's a win. The other guy, Jamari Sharp, number 22, he's the corner, Richard Jr. on the other side. He was the one who was like, boy, you see number 22 around a lot of these long passes. And, he's not in man coverage on all of them, but it did feel like Penn State kind of knew where he was and was able to find stuff. One of the 40-yarder to Pena was against him. There were a couple more downfield shots, guys he was kind of on or around on the second scoring drive for Penn State. It was one of those things where it was like, they might have one guy who you can kind of put one-on-one and not have to have safety help over the top, maybe, and, you can maybe play whoever it is to sort of a stalemate. I don't think they've got two of those guys. And, as you said, I look at their secondary play and I think they're going to have to really get a little zesty with the pass rush, because I don't think they're going to hold up entirely. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to put up 60 points or anything like that, but it just feels like Ohio State is probably going to have some opportunities in the passing game if they can give Julian Sayin time.
Well, I would agree with that. And even that Indiana offense, or the Indiana defensive line, was getting pushed around at times by Penn State. I thought at the end Penn State was going to be able to run the clock out, because that's the way things were going. And then Indiana, as they have done this season, bowed up and shut things down. But yeah, overall defensively, gave up 14 points in the fourth quarter and got outgained both in rushing and passing in this game by Penn State, who has struggled to do those things at times this year. I walk away from this being very impressed by the grit and even, dare say, against Penn State, the moxie of Indiana to come through with this. And you can also see the individual talents that they have interspersed throughout the team defensively here and there. Aiden Fisher, I thought they asked him to do so much, and he's running all over the place in play action. So there's a way to manipulate him as well, but you better get the ball over top of him, or he's going to make some plays there as he's running back on these play actions. But there's just not the scope of the talent, I think. But it all comes together very, very well, and they've been able to win games that are maybe a little bit more matchup games. So that's impressive. Defensively, overall, I think Ohio State can score on them.
Yeah, I came away from this, and this is probably, in terms of just the opposing team's record and the score, this is the worst performance they've had this year. Now, Penn State's record does not really reflect the level of talent, which is all conversation. We had a bunch the week leading up to the Ohio State-Penn State game. I think you can very easily look at these teams and say Ohio State has more talent and Indiana has a better resume right now, where Indiana has beaten three teams that, how would Ohio State have done against Oregon and Iowa, especially on the road at Iowa and on the road at Oregon? We don't know, because they haven't had to play that caliber of team on the road yet this season. So, they beat Washington, which is not as good as Oregon. Yeah, they beat Illinois, which is not as good as Iowa. So I think you can look at these teams and say, if you want to make the case that Indiana is going to hang in there and maybe win the Big Ten championship game, if it is these two teams, I think the case is battle-tested, talented, not as talented, but talented enough to keep it close, and then have the experience and the, yes, dare I say, moxie to come back and pull out a game in the end. because they've been tested in a way that Ohio State hasn't necessarily. But also, you could look at these teams and say, yeah, but Ohio State's probably underperforming its metrics to a certain degree because they're just kind of working on stuff sometimes, and the computers don't necessarily know that. So you could tell me Ohio State wins by 14 points, and I'd kind of go, yeah, okay, I could see that. And you could tell me this is a close game and Indiana's driving in the final minutes and this is anyone's game. And I'd kind of go, yeah, I could see that for sure. So yeah, I think, this is last year's Indiana was kind of isn't that cute? Look at them. They're just like a big boy football team, and you kind of tousle their hair and go, look at them. This is, they haven't played anyone, but boy, they sure have won all the games they haven't played. And oh boy, look at them. This year, this is an Indiana team that is leaps and bounds better than last year's Indiana team, I think, in a lot of areas. They're not perfect. They certainly have areas that opposing teams can probably exploit, but also you don't hear any of the SEC folks talking about, oh boy, the seventh best team in the SEC would absolutely beat Indiana this year. You're not hearing that. And that, I think, tells you a lot.
Well, I think last year's Indiana team had a cap on it, and the cap was Curtis Rourke. Basically, he was only going to be able to do so much. I think with Steven Mendoza, that quarterback cap is gone. Now it becomes everything else. It's the overall scale. It's the offensive line. It's the secondary, where those become the bigger questions. And when those are your bigger questions, I think that's almost a good thing, because you know that Steven Mendoza is going to do whatever it takes and can do whatever it takes. Curtis Rourke, you need things to go your way, and very good quarterback, but very good. Mendoza, we're talking about the possible top 10 NFL draft pick. So, and a guy that can pick up a third down with his feet or with his arm or with the power of his mind. So there's a lot to like about Indiana, not the least of which is they have yet to fold. And in fact, when it looks like they're folding, they just double down and get even stronger. And there's something certainly to be said for that. So Tom, anything else before we go?
You said Steven Mendoza twice, so I'm just going to correct you and say Fernando Mendoza. I'm sure you were thinking of the Colombian soccer player. I'm like, Steven, no, that's not it. That's, yeah.
No, there
right.
is.
All you have in your head right now is Gus Johnson just screaming Mendoza and having his voice crack, even worse than Sean McDonough is back in the trouble with the snap game. So, yeah, it's understandable. I am looking forward to if Ohio State and Indiana do play, I am really looking forward to just sending back and forth McBain memes all week long. Mendoza! It's going to be finally something to look forward to.
Thank you for correcting me on that, because now the Indiana fans in the comments of this, I know it's Fernando. Okay, I apologize. This is a name I have battled for a long time, and
Indiana quarterback Fernando Valenzuela.
So there you go. Thank you all for tuning in, and we appreciate that. If you could hit the thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening, a 5-star rating and review is always welcome. And of course, you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com talking about this potential game, but the actual games this week as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.